So the understanding the tenets of the different schools can help us to understand the teachings. For instance, when His Holiness is teaching, he's talking many times about especially the Prasangika school and the way they posit reality, and then the Svatantrika school and how they posit reality, and the debates that are happening within these schools, and why it is so that Prasangika school more the ultimate or the final view represents from reality, and not the Svatantrika school. And so the better we understand that, we also, it's not just that I understand the teachings that I'm listening to, and it's not just that I understand the debates, but also it will help us to connect more with reality as it is. You know, the Buddha said we ordinary beings, we are blinded by ignorance. Our mind is obscured. Our mind is, it has a kind of a veil in front of the reality, which makes that we cannot see reality as it is. And what we mainly do is that we add some qualities to reality that in actuality do not exist. So we make something up. It's not that I make up that there is a chair, but what I make up is the way that chair exists. I make something up about the reality of that chair. For instance, in general, the way we add something to reality is that we add that things are more permanent and more concrete than they are in actuality. Right? When I see a chair, I just see a chair. And I can see a rotund chair, but I don't see where is the rotund coming from. Right? What that rotund before was a plant. And that plant, in order to grow, needed the sun, and it needed water, and it needed fertile ground. It needed a lot of nutrients. And then there are many people involved in cutting the rotund and then preparing it to make chairs of it. And then the chair has to, go to the shop and whatever. At a certain point, it ends up here in the center. But it's not going to stay here forever, right? But it appears to us as if it is. Right? So one day, maybe we stand on the chair and we crack through it. And we think, how is this possible? Right? But the chair is impermanent by nature. So one day that impermanence will manifest. Whether that is when we stand on it and we crack through it, or maybe it lasts for a long time, and at a certain point we can see, oh, now it's getting really old, and now it doesn't look good anymore. So we put it on the street or we get rid of it. And then where does the chair go? Maybe it has another life in another family. Maybe it goes to the garbage. And then maybe slowly it starts to disintegrate. Right? So when I see the chair, I see only this moment of the chair. I don't see all the other moments of the chair, how the chair came into being. I also don't see all these moments of deterioration and where the chair is going afterwards. I only see this moment. So that makes the impression that I have of the chair much more permanent than it is in actuality. Right? So that is one thing that we project. Also, what we project is that chair, when I say chair is one thing. But that chair is made out of, we can say it has many parts, right? All these little pieces of rotund all put together creates the chair. I don't see all these parts of the chair. I only see chair. Right? So I see something what we call is unitary, which is one thing. We do not see the parts. We're not looking at the parts. I can focus on the parts, and yes, then I can see them. But normally when we enter into a space, we see things. I see one chair here, one chair there, one chair there. I'm not going to look at all the parts of each and every chair. right? We somehow organize in our brain or in our mind things as being a unitary thing. And of course, that is a functional process. That is very good. That is, we need that in order to be able to communicate with each other. We need that in order to simplify reality so that we, our mind is not constantly occupied with looking at paths and looking at causes and conditions and looking at the very tiny details. We would not be able to do anything else than just that. So we organize the mind, and we have somehow agreed. We call that a chair. We all know that. We learn that when we are small. And so then that becomes a chair. It's like a real chair. It is as if it exists from its own side as a chair. And so that chair almost seems to have an entity of itself, right? That makes it a chair, as if it has an autonomous entity which makes that. That is the reason that I call it a chair, right? There is a chairness there. Why do I call that a chair and not a table? Because there are qualities there that I've learned. If these qualities are there, it is a chair. So what we don't see when we see chair is how the chair depends upon so many things, like the causes and conditions, like the parts, but also my own mind. Right? We all have decided that we call something like that a chair. What I believe, how the chair appears to me, is as if the chair exists from its own side as a chair. I have forgotten that we can look at how a little child learns that that is a chair, right? A child doesn't know when it is born that we call that a chair. It doesn't know that that is a chair. But then mom will tell the child, you sit in the chair. Come on, sit in the chair. Don't fall off the chair. This is the chair. And mom will repeat that many times. And then the child will at a certain point say, oh, this is a chair, mom. And then mom says, yes, that is a chair. And that is repeated also many times. And at a certain point, the child thinks, now I know that's a chair. Hey, mom, that's a chair. Yes, that's a chair. And at a certain point, the child somehow, instead of being open to what is that, and then learning that we call that a chair, at a certain point, the child starts believing that it is not just a thing there that we are calling a chair, but that is the chair itself. That is a real chair. Chair is living over there. In actuality, chair is a name that we have given to that thing, right? And so chair comes into being by that name and that thing coming together. That is the chair. The word chair comes from my mind. Not only the word chair, also the image chair, also the permanence of chair, also the independence of chair. All that comes from my mind. It's not coming from that thing out there. And so then the child believes that is a chair. And then believes in that for the rest of their lives, right? This is, unless we meet the teachings that say, well, maybe look at that a little bit differently. So what we add to reality is that it is more permanent, more unitary, more independent than it exists in actuality. So we add a quality to the chair, right? So we see something that is not there. Lama Zopa would say, we are hallucinating. We are hallucinating. We see things that are not there. So that is one way that ignorance manifests. That's one way how things manifest. We add qualities to things that in actuality are not there. Another way how that ignorance manifests is that we things that do exist, we say we believe they in actuality do not exist. For instance, we believe that only the things that we see and hear and perceive with our senses, they exist, and everything else does not exist. That is just a belief. So when we talk about past and future lives, when we talk about beings in other realms that we cannot perceive, when we can't perceive them, we say they do not exist. You know, these Buddhists, they're weird. You know, they believe that there are spirits and there are gods and there are other kinds of beings. But I mean, we don't see them, right? So they're not here. I only believe it when I see it. We even have a saying like that, no? I only believe it when I see it. Another thing that we cannot see is, for instance, the result of our actions. Right? So we engage in actions every day, every minute of the day, every moment of the day. Our mind is active and has an intention, which means that we're creating an action. And we somehow believe like that has no effect. Right? According to Buddhism, there is an effect. Each and every action that we do has an effect, because an action is just a functioning thing, and so that will have a result. But we can't see it, so, you know, or we think that if nobody sees our actions, you know, then there will be no effect from that. Right? If I hide it, there will be no effect. So these are the two ways that our mind is obscured, or how it comes into that the obscurations of our mind manifest. We believe in things that in actuality do not exist, and we do not believe in things that in actuality do exist. So that means that the way that we experience life and everything that happens to us and everything that we are doing and the way that we see or believe in how things work is not in line with how reality and actuality exists. There is a disconnect, right? And the disconnect is not just one disconnect and we reconnect and then it's done, but there is a lot of confusion. So there is a lot of, you know, on the basis of one disconnect, we can go into a lot of confusion, and we have to undo that confusion in order to reconnect with reality. And the more we can reconnect with reality, which means the more we can remove the things that we project onto reality that in actuality do not exist. And the more we understand what does exist, even if we can't see it, the more we come in line with how reality is, the less suffering we will experience, and the more happiness we will experience, the more free we will be from our disturbing emotions. The more wisdom we develop, the more compassion we develop. Right? And eventually, we want to fully develop our potential of wisdom and compassion, so that we can be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. So that is where we eventually want to go. And so what tenets, the study of tenets does is that we're going to look at different ways how different beings see reality. Yeah. And so I thought what we're going to do is that tonight we do an introduction on the tenets and what tenets are and why we study them. And I mean, I did a small introduction, but we can do that a little bit deeper and what it actually entails when we study tenets. And then maybe we can make a start tonight with the text. And then tomorrow we do a big part of the text. And then the day after tomorrow, we do the last bit of the text. I think, I don't know if it's going to happen like that. It might happen completely different. Tenets is an intellectual study, right? But I like to make things practical also. And I also would like that whatever we're talking about somehow connects with where you are at with the studies. And I have no idea where you're at with the studies. So I need to hear that from you. So feel free to ask questions, however many. Also people online, I don't know how they can maybe put questions in the chat, or they can we can make some time sometimes to stop and ask them. They can unmute themselves. Okay. But they need to put up their hand somehow, no? They can just or wait, there's someone who has an idea. You have an idea? I think put up hands is good, right? That people put up, they can put up the hand, no? They can press a button that says put up the hand in the reaction. Yeah, but I don't. For me, if I'm on a roll and people start interfering, it's very difficult because my memory is not that I forget what I was talking about. So if they're very skillful and when they come in with a question, but otherwise it's easier when they put up their hand, and then when I stop, they can talk. Yes, so somebody is going to sign me. Somebody's going to sign me. Are you taking your computer for that? Or for text? Oh, for the text. Yes. Oh yeah, you're going to share that online. So that is a little bit my plan for the weekend. So it might, I hope there's going to be a lot of discussion and a lot of questions, because that is always helpful to really kind of fill in the gaps, right, that we have in our knowledge. And maybe it is good. I don't know how much but normally when we engage in activities in Buddhism, the main thing is that we set up a good motivation in terms of if we think that what we're doing now has an effect, and we know that whatever we do has an effect, then the effect that what we are doing depends not only, but very strongly on the motivation for our actions. So in Buddhism, we always take a little bit of time to set up a good motivation for engaging in the activities. And then at the end, what is also very powerful for the result is our dedication. So we can do, at the last day, we can do an extensive dedication on all the merit that we have created. And so for setting the motivation for this weekend, if we do not put a little bit of effort in setting a motivation, what happens is that we use our normal motivation, our day-to-day motivation. And if we look into that day-to-day motivation, that is actually about, I want to be happy now, right? It's like there is no long-term vision. There is no idea about anybody else except me, right? So it's a very self-centered, short-term mind that we have. We want to have instant gratification. Not that that gratification would come, but we are motivated by, I want to be happy in this life. I want to be happy in this life. And if we have only that motivation, then actually we are only creating causes for suffering, or at least samsara, which really we do not want to do that. No, we want to create causes that is going to help us to become completely free from all our suffering. and maybe even more than that. So in order to, yeah. So in order to develop a proper motivation, the motivation should be holding more than just our own happiness. And that motivation should be at least reaching, it should not go about this life, not just about this life, you know, it should reach further than this life. And so the first type of motivation that we can set is that we want to make sure that in the next life we also have very good opportunities and conditions in order to listen to the teachings and in order to keep engaging in the practice so that we can keep developing our mind by improving its wisdom and compassion. But even if we do think about that, you know, then we are still caught up in samsara. We are still caught up in the fact that whatever causes, whatever actions we are doing, it has a result that eventually leads to suffering. So in order to address that, what we're thinking is that I want my actions to become a cause, at least to be liberated from cyclic existence, to be liberated from having to take rebirth again and again and again under the influence of karma and delusions. I want to be liberated from all of that, from my delusions, so that my mind is completely free of the delusion, so that my mind is in a state of constant peace and constant happiness, right? I want to be free of all suffering. So that is the setting the motivation for one's own liberation. And so from that, then we can think, hey, but I'm not the only one here who is experiencing all that suffering. There are so many, I mean, each and everyone around me is experiencing from similar type of suffering. So what I'm going to do is, I know that these beings around me, I have a connection with them, you know. I mean, in this life, there is one being who is my mother, one is my father, then we have maybe brothers and sisters, we have other family members, we have friends, we have all of them are in the same boat as us. So what if I can generate a motivation that I'm not only wanting to have benefit for myself from what I'm going to do, but somehow I want whatever I learn, however my wisdom increases, however my compassion increases, I'm going to use that to be of most benefit to, we could say, whoever is in front of me. And I'm not going to exclude anyone from that. So engaging in the study, in the Dharma study, what we are doing is we are increasing our qualities of wisdom and compassion. That's the purpose of engaging in these studies. So that benefit that we're going to harvest from this, we say, I'm not going to keep that just for me. I'm going to freely share that with each and every sentient being that appears in front of me. And so then when we do that, when we engage in the studies, we rely upon the teacher, the one who brought these teachings to this world, which is Shakyamuni Buddha. That is a kind of our guide. And we rely upon the teachings that he gave. These teachings are that when we can actualize these teachings in our mind, is going to bring us the freedom from all our suffering. And we also rely upon each and every one who is supporting us in our study and in our practice. And we call that the Sangha. And so the way that we express relying upon Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha is by taking refuge in them. So we can just sing the refuge prayer together. Sangye chedan sangye chonam la janchu badu dani kyapsu chi nage jinso gi pe sonam gi drola penchia sangye dropa sho sangye chedan sangye chonam la janchu badu dani kyapsu chi nage jinso gi pe sonam gi Drola penchia sange drupa shu sange chodan songe chonam la janchu badu dani kyapsu chi nage jinso gipe sonam gi drola penchia sange drupa shu. You're looking at the four immeasurables. Oh, change. Yeah, we're not going to go through that. Let's do it. No, we're just going to go now into the teachings. Yeah. So I want to say a little bit about, when we study tenets, what are we actually studying? Tenets. What is a tenet? And if we look into the etymology of tenets, what does tenets mean? Then it says that it means an established conclusion. Tenets, no? Maybe you can Google that. Somebody can Google that. Yeah. An established conclusion. So by studying the scriptures and by listening to the teachings, by using reasoning, at a certain point you come to a conclusion. And you believe that is the meaning of what I'm reading, what I'm studying. So what happens in Buddhism is we can wonder, like, why are these standard systems there? And are they just in Buddhism, or we can also find that maybe in other traditions, right? And I think even in the Western philosophy, there are many different tenets. There are many many different beliefs in how reality exists and why things happen the way they happen, right? So people have, and there are, how you say that? Streams of thought, also in the Western philosophy, right, where people belong to. Same in the Indian tradition of the philosophy. There are many different tenet systems, many different beliefs. So there are in India they studied, for instance, the Vedas and the Vedic scriptures. And then there are teachers who say that this in the Vedas means this and this and this and this. And I'm listening to the teacher and I think, yeah, that teacher's right? And so what they would do in India, they would follow the teacher. So there were many people who had left their home and they would just follow the teacher into a space and then they would live somewhere in the forest or in nature, and then they would discuss and they would share, and then sometimes they would meet with other groups of people who had different beliefs and they would debate. So that was already happening in India at the time that the Buddha was born. And so then when the Buddha came in to India, he achieved enlightenment in Bodh Gaya around the age of 35, I think. And so 7 weeks after that, he started teaching. And we all have heard maybe that the Buddha taught 3 wheels of Dharma, right? We have 3, the first wheel of Dharma, the second wheel of Dharma, and the third wheel of Dharma. So it's like, did the Buddha teach 3 times? Or did the Buddha teach for 3 periods of time? Or what are these three wheels of Dharma? What are they actually? And if we look into the teachings that belong to these wheels of Dharma, then we can say that the teachings that belong to the first wheel of Dharma, these are teachings in which the Buddha said that everything that exists truly. Everything that exists truly. And so all the teachings that the Buddha taught, in which he said everything that exists truly, are kind of condensed under, or they are categorized under the first wheel of Dharma. And so some of these teachings he did, this was the first teaching where he taught the first part of that belongs to the first wheel of Dharma is the first teaching that he gave in Deer Park on the Four Noble Truths. That's the first wheel of Dharma. But also teachings that he gave later in life, where he teaches that everything that exists truly. We say that they belong to the teachings of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And so then the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the main teaching that is part of that is the perfection of wisdom and the first teaching that he taught was the teaching on vulture speak in Vajrayana in India near Nalanda monastery. And so in that teaching, the Buddha said, everything that exists does not exist truly, which is the opposite. Right? So everything that exists does not exist truly. And then later, I think, I'm not sure when he taught the third turning of the wheel, that was in Vaishali. And there he said, some things exist truly and some things do not exist truly. And so here you have three totally different ways of talking about reality. Right? And then you think, oh, does this Buddha doesn't know what he's talking about? First he says this, then he says this, and now he says it can be both. What is true? What is true? Right? So then in dependence upon that, the disciples, they start studying and they have a certain understanding. And then there are people who say, well, the first turning of the wheel, then the Buddha really taught what was true. While others said, no, it's actually the second turning of the wheel. And then there are others who say, no, it was the third turning of the wheel. Right? So there are different disciples. And I think what the Buddha did, or what we think the Buddha did, is he was very skillful. And so the Buddha teaches independence upon the qualities or the capacity of the disciple in front of him. And so if there is somebody in front of him who cannot hear that things do not truly exist, because they would completely lose it, right? Then he says things do exist. Things exist truly. To accommodate that person, because that is the level of that person and that is the level that that person can practice. So I'm not going to tell you something that makes you crazy, right? Or that makes you freak out. I tell you something that you can do something with, so that you can start practicing and start improving your mind and your conditions because of that. Right? So that is what he said to people who could not hear anything about the emptiness, about that things do not exist truly. And then there are beings who have a capacity of mind. They can hear that things do not exist truly. They don't have a problem with that. They actually immediately get it, and they immediately have realizations. I mean, that what happened at the time of the Buddha, right? We wish that we had that, but that happened at the time of the Buddha. So that is for disciples who have that capacity. And then there are these teachings where he says, some things do exist truly, others do not exist truly. So these are beings that can hear partly that things do not exist truly, but they cannot hear the whole thing. So they still need something to hold on to as being truly existent. in order to be able to be motivated and interested in practicing. Right? So dependent upon the disciples, the Buddha taught like that. And then the Buddha mentioned that some of his teachings need to be taken literally, and some of his teachings need to be interpreted. You cannot take them literally. He did not say, these teachings you have to take literally and these you need to interpret. So what then happens is that all these disciples, depending on where they are, they point to different scriptures and say, these need to be taken literally and these need to be interpreted. All right. Can you see the complexity? And so there are many great beings who heard the teachings of the Buddha, or they read the teachings of the Buddha, or they got the oral transmission of the teachings of the Buddha, and then studied them and deeply meditated upon them, and then came to certain conclusions. And they say, this is what Buddha meant. This is what he meant to say. And so that can differ, right? Depending upon where somebody is at. And so there are many different interpretations of what the Buddha has been teaching, what the real meaning is of that. And so at a certain point, these different types of conclusions, or it's not just an opinion, but it is really coming about independence upon reasoning and studying the scriptures, but you come to a certain idea. This is what is actually the intention of the Buddha. This is what he was teaching. And so if then at a certain point, they have been grouped into 4 different tenet schools. And these tenet schools, they have, we call this is, for instance, the middle way tenet school. They have certain aspects in common. And so then all these commentators that have given comments on the teachings of the Buddha that say certain things that are falling, that we can put under the middle way, they are put into that group of, these are the tenets of the middle way school. And then there are tenets of the mind-only school. And then there are tenets of the Sautantrika school. And so there are different schools. They're not schools where you go to and where you do some study, but we call them schools because they, if we understand their tenets, they educate us, right? But these tenet schools have come into being after people have been studying the Buddhist teachings and after they have given their own interpretation of these Buddhist teachings, right? So people come and they categorize that. Oh, this person belongs here, this person belongs there. So it is not that, for instance, we have Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna is someone from the middle way tenet school. It's not that he was from that tenet school when he was alive. But later people heard how he was interpreting Buddhist teachings. And he was the first one who was interpreting Buddhist teachings like that. So he is kind of has established that tenet school, but not he himself, right? Other people have done that much later in time, right? So there was this vast amount of not, I shouldn't say amount, there's this vast amount of commentaries on Buddhist teachings, all from different perspectives. And then people have come and they have categorized these teachings. And so these teachings, they have something in these categories have something in common, which makes them very specific. And so we call them then different tenet schools. They have a different opinion on what the Buddha actually was teaching, how we need to interpret that, what he was teaching. So what does that mean for us? If you hear that, we're going to study that. Do you think, wow, that's interesting? Or do you think, oh my God, where are you going to go with that? Or huh? A little bit of both. So you can imagine, I don't know, when I studied this for the first time, which is a long, long time ago, I actually had no idea what we were studying. And you go, and then I mean, I can repeat it, but I had no clue. It's like, what are they all talking about? And because when we go through the tenets, you look into different aspects. All the tenet schools, they talk about the basis. It's like how do we how do we posit that things exist? How do we posit that persons exist? How do we posit that two truths relate to each other? Right? How does reality exist? This is the basis of every tenet school. And then they talk about the path. That what do I need to do in order to develop my mind? And then they talk about the result. How do I go about in order to achieve that result? So all these standard schools explain that. They explain the basis, they explain the path, and they explain the result. Right? And so that is the path. We want to attain that result, right? So we have to check what are they talking about when they talk about their result. And then we need to check, is that in accordance with reality or not? And of course, all these standard schools say, we are presenting how reality exists in actuality. Right? And we hear His Holiness when he's talking about the tenet schools that, and when he's talking about the middle way, we have to find the middle way, right? We have to find the middle way. We should not abide in any of the extreme of what we call permanence or annihilation. We should not annihilate anything. So what I said in the beginning with that we add something to reality, the addition that we add something to reality that in actuality doesn't exist, that is the extreme of permanence. And that we do, that there are things that exist and that we say, no, 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 they do not exist. That is the extreme of nihilism. So what we want to do, we want to have the middle way so that we do not project anything upon phenomena that in actuality doesn't exist, but also that we don't deny things that actually do exist. That is the middle way. So now all these standard schools say, we follow the middle way. We have the middle way. Right. And so so when they posit their system, they say we have the middle way. For instance, if I have the highest standard school, the Prasangika school, they look at the other schools, at the lower schools, and they say they all hold on to permanence. They make things too permanent. They hold on to something that in actuality doesn't exist, and then they also deny something. If you look into the lower schools and they look at the Prasangika school, they said they are nihilist. They negate things that in actuality, uh, they negate things that in actuality do exist. For them, they say they believe that nothing exists. Nothing exists at all. They're nihilists. And so you can imagine that there are going to be lots of debates between the schools because they all say this is the basis, this is the path, this is the result. And I represent the middle way. So then what is the middle way? Because they all say something different. Right. And so this is a kind of the game. This is kind of the game. Are there any questions so far? Yes. For people online, do you need a mic? I don't know.
My question is, how many people or how today people are really believing in the lower tenets? There are really like schools, like groups, as you explained, still like in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, are still people who are what you would call in the lowest, for example, school. Because it
In
seems,
general, you say that?
yeah, there's still people who really believe that, or are
Just look at the Western scientists
no. But I speak about in Buddhism,
and Buddhism.
like in Tibetan Buddhism, especially.
Well, in Tibetan Buddhism in general, they say that, and this is within all the schools of Tibetan Buddhism, not the tenet schools, but like the Nyima, the Kagyu, the Gelugpa, and the Sakya. They all say that the Prasangika school represents the final view, is the most profound view, is the most subtle view of reality. So within Tibetan Buddhism, you know, I mean, people who have not studied or who don't have a maybe good understanding, they might hold on to that. But in general, people say no, right? It's like, then also there are people who practice the Hinayana path, right? But do they really hold on to the Hinayana view, or do they actually have the view from the Prasangika, which is the most subtle view? The teachers would say that if you really want to become liberated from samsara, you need to have the highest view. You can only do that with a Prasangika view. You cannot do that with the other views. So if somebody is really liberated, they say they must have the Prasangika view, even if they are belonging to the Hinayana practitioners. Right? So you can be a Hinayana practitioner with a Prasangika view. When we speak about the views, so let me speak a little bit about the schools that we have, right? If we have never heard about that, then you already think what is she all talking about. So if we look into the schools, there are 4 main schools in Tibetan Buddhism. The first one is the Vaibhashika school, and it's also called the Great Exposition School. The second one is the Sautantrika school. And in English, we call that the Sutra school. So both of these are called Hinayana tenet schools because what they strive for is their own liberation. They do not strive for enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. They are a Hinayana view that only strives for the liberation for themselves. They actually believe that you cannot develop the state of Buddhahood in your own mind. It's impossible. So you can only get liberated. You know, this is the possibility that we have. And then they believe that sometimes there are beings like the Buddha who can become a Buddha, but that's not something for ordinary beings that can be done. And so then there are the 2 schools that belong to the Mahayana school, which is the school that strives to attain the state of Buddhahood in order to be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. And the first one of that is what is called the Chittamatra view, or the Chittamatra school, or in English, it is the mind-only school. And then the second is the Madhyamika, or the middle way tenet school. So we have two Hinayana schools and two Mahayana schools. And then especially within the Mahayana schools, there are many divisions, but we're not going to go there now. You know, I just want you to know we have these four schools. So all these schools, they show us different presentations with respect to the basis, the path, and then the result. And they all claim that they are free from the two extremes. So do you understand when I talk about the extreme of permanence and the extreme of nihilism? Can we look online if people understand that? Yes, okay, cool. Yeah, that's maybe too much in detail to spell that out now. So what all these standard schools have in common, Buddhist standard schools, you know, Buddhist standard schools, they came into being in India where there were already many tenet schools. So there is a difference between the Indian tenet schools and the Buddhist tenet schools. There are certain things that Buddhists say that the Indian tenet schools do not say. Right? So there we can recognize, oh, these are Buddhist tenet schools. So what makes the tenet school a Buddhist tenet school is what we call the four seals. The four seals are the qualities or the beliefs or the convictions or the conclusions or the with respect to reality that all the Buddhists hold. And so the first one of that is that all compounded phenomena are impermanent. Compounded phenomena are phenomena that are made up out of more than one thing. Right? They are compounded. They are created due to causes and conditions. Everything that is created by causes and conditions is necessarily impermanent. And we might say, yeah, of course, it's impermanent. But there are Hindu schools or Indian tenet schools, they say, no, there are things that although they are created by causes and conditions, they are permanent. For instance, sound is permanent. Right? There are Indian schools who say sound is permanent because sound was always there. So there's a whole debate, you know, about what.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, that's what they say. Sound is permanent. So we say, oh, why would you say that? You know, but and I think they hold on to more things as being permanent, which in actuality are not. I'm not sure if they, when something always has been there, that makes it permanent. You know, I know that in the West, we also use the word permanent to describe that, but it always has been there, right? For instance, the mind, if we say that the mind is beginningless, then it must be permanent because you can't destroy it. But then Buddhism says, no, the mind is impermanent because it's changing moment to moment. But it always has been there, so it should be permanent, right? So there is a confusion also about the word permanent, how we use it. I don't know if the permanent sound, they say that is the sound that was there from the beginning, the Om, you know, Om. Om is the sound from which everything arises. Om represents also body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So Buddhism would agree from Om everything arises, right? There is a Buddhism could say, I agree with that, but that doesn't make that it is permanent. Anyway, the four seals is all compounded phenomena are impermanent. And the second one is that all these contaminated things are in the nature of suffering, are suffering. Contaminated things are everything that is created by karma and delusions. Everything that comes from karma and delusions is by nature suffering. Our body is created by karma and delusions. It is by nature suffering. We believe that our body is a producer of happiness. We might not be very good in it, but we somehow believe that if we just keep trying, and if we do the right thing, it is going to produce happiness, right? If we eat the right thing, if we work out in the right way, if we do everything perfectly, then it will produce happiness. But the body is created by karma and delusions. And so, although, pleasant feelings can arise in the mind, suffering will always follow. And even these pleasurable feelings, they are in the nature of suffering, which means they will change. They will necessarily change. So that is the second thing that Buddhist tenets agree upon. And then the third one is that all phenomena are selfless. And the selflessness that Buddhism talks about here in terms of the four seals is the selflessness of a permanent, unitary, independent self. So the Indian tenet schools, they posit such a self. They talk about Atman, right? They look into the body and the mind, and they say, where is the self? What is the self? And they look in the body and the mind, and they say, there is no self there. But there is a self. So they project the self outside of themselves as a permanent entity, as a unitary entity, independent entity, ultimately existent. And you can become that, right? You just have to know that this is not who you truly are, but that is who you truly are. And by identifying with that, somehow you can actualize that state, or you can become one with that. I'm not 100% sure how I'm sure I'm not saying it correctly, but the self that they hold on to does not exist in their body. They know that. But they believe that the true self is a permanent, unitary, independent self. And so what the Buddhists agree upon is that such a self does not exist. And so you can imagine that in the time of the Buddha, these Indian disciples were also listening to the Buddha, and they believed in that permanent, unitary, independent self. And they said to the Buddha, does the self exist or does it not exist? And the Buddha knew, if I'm going to say the self exists, they will take it as if the permanent, unitary, independent self exists, which is not true. So I can't say that. But when I say the self does not exist, they will also not be able to take that, because then there is nothing left. It's like that's the only thing they hold on to. So then the Buddha just kept quiet. He said nothing. And so there are, in the Buddhist text, I think there are 14 unspecified questions that the Buddha did not answer. And then some people say, the Buddha didn't know the answer, right? But the Buddha knew that whatever answer I give, it will be misinterpreted. And so therefore it is better that I give no answer. And so in Buddhism, all phenomena are free of that permanent, unitary, independent self. And then they say nirvana is peace. Nirvana being the state in which you have realized the nature of reality. Not only that, you have realized that the self, right? So they say the permanent unitary independent self doesn't exist. But then we do hold on to a self, right? We do believe that there is a self. We somehow have this feeling that if I talk about myself or I think about myself, that there is an independent entity within me, independent of the body and the mind. Right? We have this sense of, some people call it the soul, or you know, the I that can come up strongly when we are emotional. But also, you know, you just walk around in your day and you have this feeling that that self is functioning independent of your body and the mind. Maybe it is ordering your body and mind to do certain things. Maybe it is you know, sometimes you can have the feeling it has nothing to do with my body and my mind. Myself is something completely different, as if it is not related to the body and the mind. You notice? So this self is called the self-sufficient, substantially existent self. It feels like there is a substance there, right, that we can point out to. It almost feels like, I know where my self is, right? But really, if we start looking for that self, can we really find it? So this is what we have to question. But it feels like that, as if there is a substance that I can say, that is myself. And then that self appears to be in control of the body and the mind, or somehow governing the body and the mind, or maybe being present within the body and the mind. You know, there's several ways that that mind appears. But there is a self-sufficiency there, yeah, not dependent upon the body and the mind. So that self, all Buddhists say, that one is creating all these afflictions that arise in the mind. And so when we realize that that self in actuality doesn't exist, that we are selfless of such a self, then also all the afflictions cease to exist. And then the mind becomes completely peaceful. Peace means the freedom of these afflictions after realizing that that self that is the cause of the afflictions in actuality doesn't exist. And so all Buddhists agree upon that. So these are the 4 seals. So we will find that back in all the 4 schools. And then within that, there's going to be a lot of variety. So do we have an idea what the tenet schools are? What tenets are? In the sense of what they're trying to do? Trying to understand Buddhist teachings? Trying to understand which teachings need to be taken literally, which teachings need to be interpreted? Then how do they need to be interpreted? And that depends upon how I see reality, right? It depends upon my mind, right? So the text that we have is written from the point of view of the Prasangika, right? So the writer of the text is one of the text writers from Sarajay. And so they come from, so when we talk about the lower tenet schools, that is seen from the Prasangika point of view, they see it as lower schools. I don't think that when you look from the lower schools, to the Prasangika, that they would say, or this is the higher school. I don't think they would say that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not sure whether, I think they say, oh, these are these people who are out of their mind. They think they can become a Buddha, but really, you know, they don't know this really. They just made it up. They say even the perfection of wisdom sutras that they are based upon, they're not really written by the Buddha, you know, not coming from Buddha. They are coming much later. They are created by somebody else. Okay. Everyone clear? Tell me.
I have heard from Zentrum and Lhundup from the emptiness. Where do they find themselves in the four schools?
I'm not sure. What is it? What are they saying? One is talking about utter emptiness or something.
Yeah, the one is the emptiness, like the Geluk or the Prasangika.
Yeah.
And the Zentrum view is like the Buddha. I think the Buddha is not completely empty himself either.
Oh, really?
I'm
not sure. I'm not sure.
No. Yeah, I just wonder where this views were they found in this system or not? They
They're
don't
not
belong.
mentioned in the system.
Right,
Here.
right.
I know there is a little bit on that in I have to look for that. The final exposition from Lama Tsongkhapa. It's written by Jeffrey Hopkins. It is a translation from Jeffrey Hopkins. In that text, you find a little. I know that a little bit on that, but I cannot remember what it is. But it is not a big thing.
Not,
you know, it's not a big thing.
That's
no.
all.
No. No. So if we can relate this a little bit to the text, right? So if we for instance, if we think about the first turning of the wheel where the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, right? So then all the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, where we talk about the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, the truth of cessation, and the truth of the path, all these teachings, all the teachings that on that are related or coming from the first turning of the wheel. I'm actually not even sure which text. You know, we don't really study that. No, it's like we do study that. Actually, I should not say that. We do study that, and we study that a lot. But these are mainly the studies that you find in the Pali tradition, right? In the Hinayana tradition, they are mainly concerned with these teachings on the Four Noble Truths. So then the second turning of the wheel, where the perfection of wisdom sutras were taught, right? That is more what we are studying. And if we look into the perfection of wisdom sutras, they themselves, they talk explicitly on emptiness, on the nature of reality. And we can find these teachings in, for instance, the Madhyamika, or we can find it into the fundamental wisdom from Nagarjuna. Then we can find it in the commentary to that from Chandakirti, that is the Madhyamika. Then there is a commentary on that, which is like the illumination of thought from Lama Tsongkhapa. So we can study the perfection of wisdom sutras in that way. There is also the Heart Sutra that belongs to that, and we can listen to commentaries on that. There is the Diamond Cutter Sutra that we can read, right? That's not too long to read. Then there is the 8,000 and the 25,000 and the 100,000 verses perfection of wisdom sutras. And I think both the 8,000 and the 25,000 you can find in English and you can read them. Right, so this is something that we can do. And then there are many commentaries written on that. So that is the explicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And then there is also a hidden meaning in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, which doesn't talk about emptiness and the nature of reality specifically, but it actually talks more about the hidden meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, which is talking about the whole path that the Bodhisattva needs to go in order to attain the full enlightenment. And so they go through the 5 paths of the Bodhisattva and all the skills that the Bodhisattva needs to develop in order to be able to realize the perfection of wisdom in their own mind, which is achieving that state of enlightenment in their own mind. So in order to study that, we studied the ornament for clear realization, right? Which in the monasteries, these are the 2 main texts. You start with the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the ornament for clear realization, which takes about 6 years. And then you study the Madhyamika, or the teachings on emptiness, which is about 3 years, right? So that is the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, both the hidden meaning and how you say that, the apparent meaning. They are studied like that over a period of 9 years. Then the teachings of the 3rd turning of the wheel, they are said to be for all practitioners, I think. So part of the teachings is the most important sutra that comes from the 3rd turning of the wheel is the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. And that is a sutra that is used by the mind-only school, or the Chittamatra school. And they, in that sutra, the Buddha said these things do exist truly, and these things do not exist truly. Right, so there is that differentiation in terms of phenomena being truly existent or not truly existent. So in the sutra, the Unraveling the Thought, and also the Tathagata Sutra is coming from that 3rd turning of the wheel, in which the Buddha teaches on the Buddha nature. And then there are commentaries on that, and some commentaries on the Tathagata mainly talks about, the commentaries on that are mainly from the Madhyamika point of view. Commentaries on the Sutra Unraveling the Thought are mainly from the Chittamatra point of view. So this is how we can find it back in the texts that we have. Are you still with me? I don't want to make it too difficult, but I just want to give you some points that you think, oh yeah, I've heard about that. Oh, it belongs there, right? But if it's too difficult, then you just leave it. Just leave it. Don't try to absorb too much.
Can you say that the Wisdom Sutras, these different verses,
Yeah.
8, 25, can you say they belong to the Madhyamika Prasangika?
No, but you could say that, no. Why would you say that?
Because they explain the wisdom kind of direct, no, or not?
So what about the autonomous school? What about the Svatantrika school?
Do they also refer to the Wisdom Sutras, to the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras? Ah.
They both go back to Nagarjuna, right? At the time of Nagarjuna, they both have their foundation in the teachings from Nagarjuna. So at the time of Nagarjuna, there was only the Madhyamika. There was no difference between Svatantrika and Prasangika. Only after Nagarjuna, when people started to comment on Nagarjuna, there were different types of commentaries on the meaning of what Nagarjuna was saying. And then from there, the Svatantrika and the Prasangika came into being. So at the time of Nagarjuna, there was no differentiation between both of them. And the perfection of wisdom sutras, they are, because in these sutras, the Buddha is teaching that nothing exists truly, right? And both the Madhyamika schools say that nothing exists truly, right? Nothing exists truly. But what the Prasangika means with nothing exists truly is very different from what the Svatantrika point of view, but the Svatantrika school says about what truly exists. But they both use the same terms, they use the same words. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Not completely.
Okay, what is left over?
Because the Buddha, when he explains in those suttas what really exists, in the perfection of wisdom, he was referring to the ultimate view, wasn't he?
He was referring to the ultimate reality.
Yes,
Yes.
that's correct. So the ultimate reality, according to Prasangika, is the Prasangika school.
Yes.
This is the Prasangika view.
Yes.
So, and then from that point of view, the others, they wouldn't be according to the sutras, no? The other schools wouldn't see, in their view, it is not correct what the Buddha, or they're not in alliance with the Buddha's.
Yeah, so the lower schools, they would say these perfection of wisdom sutras are not really from the Buddha. They're not from the Buddha. This is what the Hinayana schools are saying. They're not from the Buddha. Then the mind-only school says, yes, the perfection of wisdom sutra is from the Buddha, but they need to be interpreted. They're not of definite meaning. Right, so that's very different. Then let me have a look. I didn't write it down. So the way that the Prasangika and the Svatantrika look at the perfection of wisdom sutras is a little bit different. Because the Buddha says sometimes things do not exist inherently. For instance, in the Heart Sutra, the Buddha says things do not exist inherently. According to the Svatantrika, things do exist inherently, but ultimately they do not. But conventionally, they do exist inherently. So what then they say, we need to interpret this Heart Sutra, and every time when the Buddha says things do not exist inherently, we have to add ultimately there. Things do not exist inherently ultimately, but they do exist inherently conventionally. Right? So they say we need to add a little bit, and therefore we need to interpret the Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra is for the Svatantrika from interpretable meaning, while for the Prasangika it is of definitive meaning. And I'm not sure about the other perfection of wisdom sutras. Because I think the Buddha talks a lot about things do not exist truly, ultimately. And so both agree upon that things do not exist truly, ultimately. So I'm not 100% sure about that. But I think for the Prasangika, they are of definite meaning, they do not need to be interpreted. But I think the same as for the Svatantrika.
Which one?
The longer sutras, the 8,000 and the 25 and the 100,000. I think they both agree that they are of definitive meaning. But I'm not 100% sure about that. So when we study the Madhyamika text, right? We studied the Madhyamika Vatara. That text is written from the Prasangika point of view. So when we study emptiness from the Prasangika point of view. When we study the Bodhisattva path, when we study the ornament for clear realization, we study it's written from Svatantrika point of view. And I think one beautiful feature from Tibetan Buddhism is that there are texts, for instance, when we study the Lorik about awareness and knowledge, we study that from the Sautantrika point of view, which is the lower school. When we study the Abhidharma, we study Abhidharma from the Vaibhashika point of view, also a lower school, right? So when you go through the study, there are periods of time that you have to think as a Vaibhashika, and then you have to think as a Sautantrika, and then you have to think as a Svatantrika, and then at the end, we think as a Prasangika. The good thing about that is that you learn to value each and every one of them, right? They all have qualities within them. And you also learn that, I don't know. When I started to study at Chenrezig Institute, nuns would say, why are we going through all this? Just give us the right view. Give us the right view, and then we're done, And then we would just repeat Geshe-la and say, this is the right view, this is the right view. But it's not about finding the right view, right? So then you say, oh, my view is that view because I know that that is the correct view. But it's not about that. It's about, because then we have still an opinion on the nature of reality. But what we actually want to get to is that we can see reality from many different points of view. And that we don't hold on to one thing as the real one. Right? Even that one we have to let go. We have to let go. Right? If I hold on to this is true, right? I'm already opposing the Prasangika view, right? This is really true. It's already opposite to the Prasangika view. So where you want to get is that you do not hold on to anything, but that you can defend each and every point of view. And you can also maybe see the faults of each and every point of view. And so then when you don't hold on to any view, you become kind of free of believing this is really true. And maybe that is more in line with reality than believing that one thing is true. Right? If we say in the Prasangika, we say nothing exists from the side of the object. So if nothing exists from the side of the object, I can look at one object from many, many, many different sides. And I can see many different things. Right? And if I feel free in doing that, and if I don't have to believe in something in order to validate myself or justify myself, or, we be somebody because I have an opinion. If I am okay with not having any of that, we become free. True. I mean, this is what I feel is the beauty of the study, is that. Before the study, I had a feeling you have certain beliefs, you have certain principles, and I had to drop them all. But it feels fantastic because it really doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what I think, right? Also for reality to be reality, it really doesn't matter what I think. Reality is reality, right? And I can understand that reality, or I can misunderstand that reality. And the more I understand that reality, the happier I am. Can you see that? So in the beginning, it can be a little bit like you hold nothing onto nothing. Then what are you about, right? It's strange in our culture, no? You need to believe something. You need to have something. You need to, and so we work with our mind, and we have our own ideas about things. But what if we would drop that? And then we maybe in the beginning don't know how to live, you know? So no, I need to keep holding on to that. But you know, I don't know. My feeling is during the study, it became less and less and less important what was in my mind. And so that frees up, you know, it's, yeah, I just want to share that because you might, while you study, you might meet moments that you think, I remember the moment that I thought, but that's like my last principle. I cannot let go of that one. I cannot let go of that one. So then you have a little fight and then you die a small death. And then you come out of that and you think, wow, I'm still alive. I'm still functioning. I'm still relating. I'm still, you know, actually nothing has changed, but the principle is gone. This idea I was holding on to is gone. And yeah, I don't know. I think you only start feeling better and better and better. It's not that you feel worse when you let go of your principles, you know, but you believe while you're holding on to it. No, I have to hold on to that. Yeah. All right. So are we ready to go into the text? Are there questions from online? Yes.
This studies, how much is philosophy and thinking about it, and how much do you do meditation or analytical meditations on it, or how does it work when you study these texts?
I mean, it is quite difficult to do meditations on the text.
Yeah.
But and I'm going to just talk about my experience, right? I don't know if that is for everyone like that. When I started to study, I did not like to move my brains. I was like, just let me be. I was a bit lazy up here. And I just wanted it to be quiet, right? So in order to make it quiet, I made it lazy. That's one thing that I had. And another thing is that if you look into how we learn, is the teacher tells us something and we study that means I need to remember it and be able to reproduce it, right? We do not learn to develop our own mind in a way that you become an independent thinker who uses logic and reasoning and can come to your own conclusions. We don't use the mind like that. We don't educate in general. We don't educate children like that. True. So the mind is like the learning capacity is like that. And so in the beginning, we would study like that. I would study like that. I just repeat it. But my mind doesn't like to move. You know, move means analyze. Move means really think about it. And Lama Zopa kept studying this. You need to study. So at a certain point, I had to start moving my brain in order to be able to digest these studies. And in the beginning, it was not nice. You know, it's like, no, I don't want that. It's a discomfort. It's an incredible discomfort because the laziness, you know, it's when you get used to just keep your mind, don't think yourself. It is, yeah, you become lazy. So to move that was very, very difficult. But so I think that happened during the study of the master's program. And then at a certain point, the mind starts moving in a way that you start feeling happy. That instead of the discomfort, you start feeling happy. And then joy is coming. And then it's like, whoa. And then I thought, wow, I have all this mental energy that has been stagnated so long in my life, never moving, because, you know, you just shut up and do what we tell you, kind of. But suddenly that is freeing up, and there is so much possibility and creativity and aliveness, and all that comes into being just by analyzing, even if I don't understand anything, right? So moving the mind itself comes already with so many qualities and so much freedom that when you don't move the mind, it's not there, right? So even if you don't understand anything, that is already a benefit that comes from studying. But going through it was not pleasant, you know, but once you've gone through it, it's fantastic. So we need to have a little bit long-term vision. Then in terms of meditating, I don't think I would. I think the study in tenets helps when you study for instance, then later we studied the Lamrim, and you go through the last chapter on emptiness, where there's a lot of debate between the Prasangika school and the Svatantrika school. So you much better understand why they're saying what they're saying, because you understand where they're coming from. Then you study the teachings on emptiness. You need to know. You need to know. You know, this is like your preparation. This is like your basis in order to be able to study bigger texts, so that you know what they're talking about. I don't know. For me, it's more thinking about it. Every time when the teacher is teaching, I'm actively thinking and seeing if I can understand, and seeing like, oh, but this I don't get, and this I don't get. And then trying to formulate the question so that I can get an answer to what I don't understand. That's already also very difficult. Formulating the proper questions so that you get the knowledge that you don't have yet. You know, I find very difficult making that question. But that's also something that we need to learn, right? So this is for me the benefit of the study. Not so much, oh, now I meditate and now I'm going to realize empty. Not like that at all. I think that's far in the future somewhere. Yeah.
Very good answer.
Okay. Moving the brain.
Maybe moving the brain is the problem.
Isn't it?
Yes.
But we're trained like that. You just repeat, and then you're a good girl. You know?
It's
like that. And actually we should have been told, and because I don't know how you would say that in German, but in Holland we say things like raceness. How would you say that? You know, when people have their own opinion, children have their own opinion, adults don't like it, right?
Yeah.
So somehow you get punished for that. Shut up. You have to shut up. You just do what we tell you.
Why you don't understand.
Or you don't understand, or you with your fantasies, or we get something thrown at us that as a child you feel like you get excluded, or you feel that you're not appreciated, or you're not liked, or you're excluded, and so then we just at a certain point we surrender and we just shut up and chew and give it back. Right, but you learn nothing from that. I think you learn nothing, right? Because what we really want is we want to connect with our own potential. We want to connect with the possibilities that we have in this human life that we can actualize, right? And you want to learn how to work with that so that you have some control over your own process. That is what makes you a human being who can take responsibility for their actions, right? We're not educated for that, I think. right? We don't learn about values. We do not learn about what makes you a happier being. We do not learn about what is happening inside you, or maybe the way you think, or that has something to do with how you feel and how you see yourself. These are all things that we don't learn as children. So, if we really want to do a good job, we bring a lot of the qualities that we are trying to develop. You bring that already in the school. You can do so much in the schools. For instance, the 16 guidelines for a happy life, right? Which are purely based on Buddhist teachings. You can bring that in the schools. You can teach children the 6 perfections, right? Being generous, being patient, practicing ethics. There are certain rules that we keep. The rules are not what I tell you. The rules are we're not harming others, right? How do we harm others? These are our rules. We are not going there. We're not doing that, right? But there's so much that we could do already on that level. And I think when you start there, also the mind becomes, and people are much more responsible human beings, taking and know how to take care of themselves, right? Another thing that I've learned in the studies is, and that's a little bit a side topic from what we're doing here tonight, but it is being with the discomfort, sitting with the shit. Sorry for my language, but it is like that. Being with the discomfort, being with the pain, being with the things that I do not like. How do you do that? For me, that's the biggest skill that I learned. Because when you can do that, you can be present in any situation. But if you do not know that, you cannot bear anything, right? And this is what we teach children. You don't like it, then tell the friend to go. You don't, right? You don't like it, just delete. You don't have to be friends on Facebook. Just delete them as your friend. If they say something you don't like, just delete them. This is what we learn, but it is so not natural, right? And it makes us so intolerable if we think like that. I don't like it, I get rid of you. No, deal with what you don't like. Deal with your discomfort, right? It is like put on the shoes so that you don't feel the hurt anymore. The hurt is in your mind. So being with that and knowing how not to fuel that, and knowing how to, we have received some pains in life, no? So how do I comfort myself when I go through that distress? And so when I have that quality, then you're strong in every situation, right? Yeah. So we don't teach children that either, right? Many children don't even get comforted by somebody else when they are in stress. Just get over yourself. Yeah. So these are all things, that is not, I never went into Buddhism and I thought this is all what I want to learn. But it just happened. And now I think, oh, but these are the most precious things that I learned. It's not the text. It's not the intellectual knowledge. Yeah, that's also there. And yes, you can play with that. And yes, can be fun. But it's not the main thing happens here. Right? And it comes as a byproduct, but I think it is actually much more important than anything else. Yes.
Very good.
Okay. Shall we make a little start with the text, or questions online or not? But are happy there? No? Okay. So maybe let me have a look. All these, I just have to find the text. Where did I put that? Are you putting it up?
There, the first thing. Is it the right text?
Yeah, presentation of tenets. So there's always all these texts, they start with the praise. And the praise kind of indicates where the text belongs. These praise are often added by the translators. And at a certain point, you know, also in Buddhism, you have all these texts, you know, where do they belong to? And so when there is a praise to Manjushri, these texts are normally belonging to the am I saying that correct? I was saying to the wisdom teachings, but this is so basic, so I already forgot. I'm so sorry. I think we said it belonged to there are 3 baskets, right? There is the basket of the Vinaya basket. So the praise to that is to the Buddha. Then there is the basket of the.
I have never started.
Okay.
I don't even know that.
It's very basic. I've heard it 100 times and I cannot repeat it. Maybe that's a good thing that I can't repeat it. I mean the side. Oh, here it is. So when we go through the text, you go. I mean, it is a very short text, and it starts with it is divided into these 4 groups: the Great Exposition School, then the Sutra School, then the Mind Only School, and then the Middle Way School. And so all these schools, we're going to look into how they present the basis, the path, and the result. And if we go school by school, then every school is divided into 7 topics. So every school starts with a definition of the school, then a division, because it is not that there is just one Vaibhashitaka tennis schools, there are different ones. There is not just one Madhyamika school, there are different ones. They're all subdivisions, right? So then there is a division. Then there is the etymology. It's like, why is it called in this way? And then it starts with the 4th point is the mode of asserting objects. So how do things exist? What kind of objects are they and how do they exist? And how do they exist? That refers to the 2 truth. You posit the conventional truth and you posit the ultimate truth. So all these schools posit that in a different way. And then there is what they call the mode of asserting the object possessors. Object possessors are mainly the consciousnesses. Right? It can also be the self. So how do you assert an object possessor? And we know there are different types of consciousness, right? Especially the sutra school or the sutra, the text on the consciousnesses is written from the sutra perspective. So when we go through the sutra school, there will be a lot of information on the consciousnesses. And then it talks about what is the mode of asserting selflessness. So what does it mean, selflessness, in each and every school? We already said that all the Buddhist schools, they refute the self of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, or they refute a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. But there are also schools who refute more than that. And so sometimes we talk about the self of persons. All schools refute a self of persons. But there are also schools that talk about the self of phenomena. What is that? How is that defined? What is it referring to? Why do we need to realize that? What happens in the mind when we realize that? And then, independence upon that, there was the presentation of the grounds and path, which means how do we proceed from where we are right now, all the way up until we enter into the path that takes us to the goal that we want to achieve. Right? There is a process of that, and there is a description of how that looks like. So in all the Tenet schools, these points are shown. Right. So if you keep in mind basis, path, result, basis, path, result. And what is very important is eventually like, what do I need to meditate upon? What do I need to realize? In order to realize that, what do I need to refute? And when I refute that, what happens in the mind when the realization happens? And where does that take me? Right? This is where we want to go with the path. So we can read through the first little bit where it says the definition of a Vaibhashika is one who propounds Hinayana tenets and asserts external objects to be truly existence, but does not assert self-cognizers. So there is a lot of information could be there, right? So the Hinayana tenets are the tenets of those who go for individual liberation, liberation for myself alone. And so in the Tenet schools, we find them in the Vaibhashika school and in the Sautantrika school. The first two schools, there are Hinayana tenets. So Vaibhashika is one of them. And then they say they assert external objects to be truly existent. And so you remember when we spoke about the first turning of the wheel, where the Buddha was teaching the Four Noble Truths and said that all phenomena exist truly. So they say that all external objects are truly existent. And what that means in the school is that when I see something, right, when my eye sees the chair, my eye perceives a representation of what is actually there. So that external object, there is an external world, which is kind of truly existent in the sense that my mind has no influence on that. It exists completely objectively. And what I see is a reflection of that objective existence, but it has nothing to do with my mind. And so that is how they believe in reality. And we can think about many people that believe in reality like that, no? It's very Western, Western style. And so they do not assert self-cognizers. Have you ever heard of self-cognizers? Has any of you studied the lyric? Awareness and knowledge? No. Self-cognizers is, so some Tenet schools, they posit self-cognizers. And they say, in order to be able to remember something, you need to have an awareness that is aware of what you went through in order to be able to remember it. So when I see the chair, the eye consciousness is not enough for me to remember it. I need to have a consciousness that sees the eye consciousness that helps me to remember that my eye consciousness saw the chair. Right? So that is called a self-cognizer. And the Sutra school posits, they say there are self-cognizers. But this school says, no, they do not exist. Right? So if you say the self-cognizer doesn't exist, then we have to come up with something else for memory. Right? How do you remember things? I'm not sure what they say about that, but we just now you know a little bit what self-cognizers are and that they do not posit any of them. And so that is like a definition. So they have this and they have that, they don't do that. It doesn't say too much, right? But we can somehow categorize them. Oh, they are in that, they're thinking like that. And then we have the divisions. So there are 3 divisions, the Kashmirish, the Aparantakas, and the Madagas. So these are 3 different areas in India. And so they're more related to these areas, huh? You're going to look them up? Yeah, just go up. Just go up. Definition. And there they are, divisions. Yeah? Okay. Oh, you were on a different page. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So these are 3 different areas in Tibet, in India, and they were more connected to these areas. And so then there is the etymology, and then they say, why are they called Vaibhashikas? And so it is because they propound tenets following the great detailed explanation. And because they propound 3 times as instances of substance. So I'm not sure about this text. Let me see if I have some information on that. In terms of the 3 times, the Sutra school, so the next school, and then up to the Svatantrika school, they say that the present moment is a functioning thing, but the past and the future are permanent. So how the 3 times are posited, it depends, right? The present is a functioning thing, the other 2 are permanent. But this school says that the 3 times are instances of substance. So they say the 3 times are actually functioning things. They are impermanent. Substance is whatever substance is impermanent, changing moment to moment. And so the 3 times are somehow instance of substances. I'm not good with the 3 times. I don't get it when people start talking about time. I just don't get it. I'm good with objects. I'm good with objects of negations and things like that, but not so much with the time. I think it's not so important. Okay. So I think when you go deeper into that, you so that we don't have too many texts on tenets. You know, there is this small text, which is the scriptwriter from the Sarah J. And then there is a little bit of the text, a little bit more extensive text is in this book, Cutting Through Appearances, which is that the second half of the book is on tenets, which is quite more extensive than here. And then there is the only thing that I know is the Maps of the Profound, which is this book, this big Jeffrey Hopkins, where he goes through all the Indian tenet schools and then go through all the Buddhist tenet schools, and it's so extensive. And that is related, or that is a translation from text school from Drepung Monastery. So there are small differences between Drepung Monastery and Sarah J. They're not positing the same things. Right, so on top of all these differences, we also have that. Different interpretations by different monasteries. Anyway, so if you want to read more, but you know, I have these books more as a reference. So when we are going through text and there are debates, that I think, oh, I can't remember what was the Chitta Mantra, and then I take my book and I repeat it in my mind, you know, in order to understand the debate. But to study it like that is very dry and difficult, I find. But yeah. And so then there is a different a mode of certain objects. What are objects? And I see that it is time. So this is the last little thing that we do. Mode of asserting objects. So what is an object? What is a functioning thing? A thing or an object of knowledge or a existent is all mutually inclusive, which means they all refer to the same thing. So, and the definition of that is that which is able to perform a function. And it has a two division, which means all permanent things and all impermanent things are functioning things. They are able to perform a function. And for us, that might maybe sounds a little bit strange. How can a permanent thing perform a function? Because what can they do? How can, for instance, uncompounded space, how do they perform a function? And so what they say is that you perform a function because you allow things to arise in it, right? You allow something. So the permanent thing itself doesn't do anything, but because it is there, it allows things to arise. And therefore it is functioning. Its function is to allow things to arise. So that is a very different way of talking about things than the South Tantrika school, which is coming next, and we see that tomorrow. All right. Are the brains frozen? Are getting
a bit hot. A little bit hot. Yes. Hot. No, not so small. Not frozen.
They're heating up. Yes. And so that is also something that happens, right? When you study these things, you try to analyze, and at certain points you feel like I cannot move anymore. It's like too much. And some people experience that as heat, and some people feel like, oh, I'm totally frozen. I cannot move anymore. So this is like we have an untrained mind, like having an untrained body and going to the gym, and you do your exercise again, and at a certain point you just cannot do it anymore, you know, not one more time. It feels like that, no? It's like we're tired. It's the brain is tired. And so we have to make sure that we don't push it too hard, right? Doing it one weekend is okay, but you we want you to come back on Sunday, no? So tomorrow we have to pace ourselves in a way that we don't push it so far that you get so much aversion that you say, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Right? We have to be careful with that. So please let me know if you feel like, oh, hold on, too much, you know, then we talk a little bit about things that are more easy, that don't need so much intellectual. And so we give the brain a little bit of a break and the mind a little bit of a break before we pick it up again. Okay, we can do that. So you have to please tell me if I don't see it. Okay. Enough for today? Yes. Okay. Shall we dedicate? Maybe I'm sure you know the dedication prayer. I can't see what you put up. Zentrum Chogrim Poche Makye Panam Gye Gyochi Gyewanyam Pame Payang Gone Gong Du Pelwa Shu Tonyi Tawa Rimpoche Makye Panam Gye Gyochi Kyewa nyampa me payang gone gong du pelwa shu.